we'll record this, and it'll be available if anybody missed the meeting and wants to catch up on it. But it's not really going up on YouTube or anything like that, but it is available for folks. So a little bit of etiquette. Make sure you've changed your name or renamed yourself with first and last name plus call sign to help Ann out and do roll. And keep yourself muted unless if you speak, try to remember to mute yourself. I can do it from here, but if you can kind of keep track of that, it'd be great. And down in the bottom, there's a reactions button, and just use sort of the wavy hand if you want to speak, and I'll watch the participants list and try to catch you and keep some order to this. So with that, oh yes, I'm KI7 Delta Papa Papa Dave, and your vice president. So good to see you all. Do we have any first-time visitors?
Yeah, this is Jim Otis, KJ7QFK.
Well, welcome, Jim.
I'm from, currently I'm in Tukwila due to coronavirus situations at the house in Kent. But you were bringing up how cold it was around here. The family house is in a place called Webster, North Dakota, and it's 6 below.
Yeah, no, it's balmy.
Anything else you want to know about me?
No, that's sent chills through all of us. That's great.
Okay.
Well, welcome.
I'm just brand new. I just joined last week, so.
Well, excellent. Welcome. Glad to be here. And see, we've got 40 participants. When we were doing our in-person meetings, we'd often get upwards of 80 sometimes. Did I see a hand, Bruce? Is that you or any other first-time visitors?
Yeah, I'm Bruce Gary. I'm maybe not a first-time visitor. I got licensed 4 or 5 years ago, joined the club, got busy doing other things, and now I'm getting back into it. So I've just rejoined.
Great. Well, welcome. Also, anybody else? Oh, Ed Garrett is sharing his screen. I don't think we want that.
Hello, Dave.
Good morning.
This is Michael Hill, WA7MPH. I'm an old hand as far as the club goes, but this is the first time I've done Zoom. So good morning, everybody.
Great. Good morning. And Ed, you're sharing your screen, so you need to unshare that because all we see is you.
I'm working on it.
There must be a way for me to unshare. There.
Sharing a screen.
All right. Well, that stopped it temporarily. We'll see.
No video. I get cameras on, but it's not blinking.
All right. We'll move on if there's nobody else. Ann, you want to give us the report on minutes?
Good morning. Yes. I've posted both the November and the December meeting minutes to the members only section of the website, and I have not received any comments. So is there a motion to accept?
I motion.
I second.
Tim and John. Okay. Any discussion? Are there any objections? Hearing none, minutes are passed. See, treasurer's report, Randy.
Gotta have screen sharing.
Yeah, I'll turn it back on here. I don't know if we still have Ed, so you should be
Okay.
open again.
Okay. Everybody see the treasurer's report?
Yep.
Okay. So pretty self-explanatory. 1380 came in, $90.67 went out. We got $8,617 in the checking account, plus 605 for the support of the repeater. And our repeater endowment is still growing. doing quite well with $12,872. And general investments, 473 to 97. Any questions? Any movement?
Any questions? All right, is there a motion to accept?
I move to accept the treasurer's report.
Second.
Okay.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, any objections? Okay, that motion is passed. Let's see, we're on to the VE report. Randy?
Yeah, we are, of course, not holding any of our own VE meetings or having sessions, but a number of members of the VE team have joined the Lake Washington Amateur Radio Club's group, and we've been conducting online testing for a few months now, and that's still going pretty strong. And we're always looking for new members who want to become a VE and want to help out do online testing. That's all I got.
Anybody have any questions for Randy on that? Okay, move on to the education report. Is Jim here?
Right here, Dave.
There you go.
I don't have a lot to report. We got quite a few folks interested. I am sending them to the Lake Washington information sites for testing, etc. Right now, like I said, we don't have any plans to have any classes anytime in the future until we can get back into Providence. And we're not planning on doing any online testing right now or online educational. We just don't have the resources to do that, I don't think, right now. That's it.
Okay, any questions for Jim? Okay, we're moving along. New member introduction, Ann.
Thank you. This month we have two new members, James Otis, who he introduced himself earlier, KJ7QFK, and Nicholas Storms, KJ7TBD. So welcome to them. And I guess I'm next on the list for list of members.
Yep.
I'm going to read the list of members that I've marked down. I've tried to get everybody, but send a private message to me in the chat if I don't read your name. Okay. So let me just go ahead and do this. Dennis Bradford, W7DEB. Tom Bruns, K7ITM. Stephen Burling, KJ7YL. James Cronin, KJ7EQK. Meg Engelter, KC7WWO. Gary Evans, AB7RK. Gary Foss, AI7DT. Ann Garay, myself, K2MTN. Ed Garrett, KJ7LSI. Bruce Gary, K7BGG. Michael Hill, WA7MPH. Roger Hoot, KF7WVT. Tim Kephart, KJ7AKV. Rodney Long, KI7YGW. Randy Mather, AJ7B. James Otis, KJ7QFK. Alan Person, K7NWR. Henry Folland, KH6VM. Greg Rainwater, W7ACM. Stephen Ramsayer, N7SRR. Ken Rich, W7SLW. Jack Rucard, KC7YE. Peter Sampson, KG7WYU. Dave Sommer, KI7DPP, John Van Dalen, N7AME, Travis Wise, KI7TEY, Michael Burnett, AF7KB, Randy Johnson, KJ7ENF, and all right, that's everybody have written down. So send me a private message if I did not read your name. And back to you, Dave.
Great. Thank you, Ann. Let's see, we are on to the repeater update. Is Rob with us this morning? How about old repeaters, Henry?
If I could get myself off of mute, I could
There
say
you go.
something. Well, we made just a few improvements. We've added a UPS, at least for the computer systems and the ham WAN routers and so forth. Maybe give us some stability. We did go down after the storm, and Rob and Ray, I had to go look at it. See, I saw that ham WAN was down, or referred that over to Rob, and he and Ray went out there and took a look at it, and the wind was strong enough to where it repointed the antennas a little bit. So Rob got to climb up there in the cold and the rain and repoint that thing with Ray's help. So he got the ham WAN all back up, and then after that, I just had to do a reset on it, and we should be back in business. So keep your fingers crossed. We should have a little bit more stability, except for maybe Windows updates, which is our bane. In the background, we've been talking about maybe moving the Echolink platform to a Linux base platform, and we're working on that. I know I've been playing with that, Eric Warden, and I know Tim's kind of involved with that too. So we're looking at alternatives to a Windows-based Echolink. That's pretty much the update for now.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Henry? Comments? Okay, move on then to old business. First piece of old business, net controllers. We are still looking for a couple of net controllers, members, and anybody to replace Jim Hill in the net control organizer position. So anybody that's interested in doing that and stepping up, we'd appreciate it. But if you are, please contact Ray, our president. Let him know you're interested in that. Any comments on that? Okay, next item, members meeting start time. So the board has voted to change the start time for the membership meeting from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. starting with the February meeting next month. So we will not be here at 8 a.m. We will be here at 9 a.m. and hope that works for most people. I think it was requested, and we all thought it was a pretty good idea. So any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea too, especially with people being at home. I think it'll boost our attendance, and we'll probably look a little better in the morning at 9 a.m. versus 8 a.m.
Yeah, I don't think any of us look at it.
Well,
Hence, that's why I'm not sharing.
Okay, moving on. Let's see. New business, annual membership renewal and password change. So, Ann, do you want to talk about that, or am I talking about that?
I can say something about that. It is time to renew your annual membership if you haven't already. Quite a few people have already renewed, and you can check the website in the members only section for the list of paid members for 2021 to verify if you don't remember if you've renewed. The website password will be updated on Sunday, February 28th, and we will process any renewals that are received in our PO box by February 26th at that time. And then we'll process anything we receive after February 26th as soon as possible, but we may not have you on the initial list on the 28th. So if you want to have no gap in your ability to access the members only section of the website, get your membership in before then. And back to Dave. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Roger, do you have a comment?
It's not clear to me how we're going to be informed of the new password. Is the email going to come out?
Yes, there will be an email like there was for August 1st. Everyone who is paid or has a life membership will receive that email. It's under the SCHC announce. Those are people who are only paid members. So we'll send that out the morning of Sunday, the 28th of February. Back to Dave.
Any other questions on that? Okay, thank you, Ann. Let's see, our next item is regarding the trustee position. So Lauren Hole, KK7M, has held the trustee position for many years, but he needs to resign, step down in that responsibility due to family obligations. So we're looking for a person to fill that role. And just as way of background, the trustee is described in the guidebook for officers and board members, and it's posted in the members only section of the website. So if you are interested and want to take a look at that, again, it's the guidebook for officers and board members. The licenses of the club repeaters and the club FCC call sign are registered in the trustee's name for as long as they serve in the position. So it's a pretty important position. It's the position's appointed by the president and ratified by the board according to the guidebook. So there isn't a club vote on this, but the trustee should be somebody with prior experience in serving on the board. And if you have an interest in that, please let Ray know. We are soliciting interested members, and then, as I mentioned, the president will be making an appointment. But if you're interested in the trustee position, take a look at the guidebook on the website and let Ray know, or any one of us. Any questions or comments on that? I don't think Lauren's with us, but I just don't. Yeah, go ahead, Roger.
Do you have to be an extra class to be a trustee?
I don't believe so. That wasn't.
There's no FCC requirement for it, and I've been on the board a couple of times. I don't remember any requirement. I think as long as your technician class or higher, that would be good enough. But I was a trustee of the 539, and it's just, you know, it's a pretty important position. I thought I'd let people know is that anytime that there's something goes wrong in the repeater, you also will be held responsible for it because you are the trustee. So just kind of little blurb and heads up about that.
Okay, any other questions or comments on that? Just really want to thank Lauren for all the years he's served in that position. He's just been fantastic on the board and it's rock solid, and just wish him well, he and his family well.
Agreed, totally.
All right. Let's see, the next thing is financial investment supervision position. So Lauren also held that position as the financial investment supervision position, and has really led the club efforts to set up and operate the repeater endowment fund and the club general investment fund. So somebody who's knowledgeable about investments is what we're looking for in this position. Again, let Ray know if you're interested in that. So Lauren was doing dual duty there, and we are in need of a financial investment supervisor. So again, let Ray know if you're interested, and we can talk about the responsibilities of that position. Any questions? Zoom class is on basic topics. John? the agenda, John, or you can't.
But, oh, there we go. I'm sorry. Yeah, I've talked to several of the club members that are new. In fact, I spent quite a bit of time with last year's joiners to the club. And I got the same thought back from each one of them that they need not necessarily a test training, but they need just basically, and Michael, would you mute your microphone, please? Michael, yeah, thank Michael. I've decided to put together a Zoom meeting possibly on Thursday night, starting next week, talking about individual things of ham radio. This would cover how do you break into a conversation on HF, not necessarily just HTs. Those are being dealt with quite nicely. And of course, we've got the this morning session, but just general practices of HF radio, sideband, digital, talking about what different things they're using, some of Michael Burnett's information because he's put together quite a nice package of stuff, but generally just a question and answer. If I can't answer it, I'm going to give them a source to go to or find somebody that'll help them out. So I will be advertising this here shortly on the reflector, and essentially it'll be anywhere from a half hour to an hour. If there is no interest, it'll get canceled. But I think there's an interest out there of just basically what's it like to be a ham? What do we do? And also we have 5 people from last year's club who were about to join the club or were about to get licensed, and of course the pandemic stopped them from doing it. And I think one of them, Kristen, is going to be licensed next week. She joined, she connected with Lake Washington Club. So that's pretty much it. If anybody's got any question, you've got my email and my phone number because I have been talking to other people about it also. So thank you. Dave, back to you.
So John, will you be setting up the Zoom meetings then? And
yes, I will be. Yeah, I have a pro subscription. In fact, I just set it up for a year now.
So
not knowing how long we're going to be stuck with this.
Yeah. So interested people, I think once you get those going, we should get out a general email to the membership to let them know those are going on and let them join in. Thanks for doing that.
Oh, one more thing. What'd I do with it? I just received this in the mail yesterday. 5-band worked all states. Took me 42 years to get it, but I finally got it.
Congratulations.
Yeah, the last 2 were New York and Rhode Island on 80 meters.
Very cool. Very cool. Congrats. Any questions for John on that? Okay, well, we're at the end of the business items. Is there any new business by anybody? Any sort of good of the order stuff? I do notice in chat that Roger Hoot's been nominated for trustee. Congratulations, Roger, being the only nominee. He's on mute. That's good. Anyway, no, yeah, please let Ray know if you're anybody that's interested in that position. Any last items? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn the regular meeting and move on to the presentation.
Second.
Okay. Any objections? Great. Well, thank you all. This is the end of the regular meeting, and we'll move on to our presentation. As I mentioned earlier, we've got Scott Honecker here. He's going to be giving us a presentation on getting the most from your HT, which I'm really looking forward to because I have several I'd like to sell, and I want to know how to get the most of them. That's a joke. I'll be here all week. So, Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Make sure everybody hears me okay. I'll see if I can start this. I get spoiled. I usually have 2 monitors, but not this morning. Huh. All right, we'll do it this way. All right, so some of this stuff is going to be a little introductory, but hopefully there's some little tidbits in here that help you out. Most people, their very first radio, of course, everybody runs out and buys a handheld. I think that's almost universal. And I have there's my very first handheld radio was a Yaesu FT23. It had like 8 buttons on it. Each one of them did one thing, and that was it. It was kind of fantastic. It was super easy to use. It had a whopping, I think it only had 8 memory channels. Anyway, it was pretty easy to deal with. Now they're crazy compact. You can see they have packed crazy features inside there. You can see this is an X-ray view of my ID51. It was kind of fun. So they really do have a really good application for anyone who doesn't drive, who needs a portable radio. If you have your own car, if you drive a lot, a mobile is certainly a more common, probably more practical solution. Commuters that use public transportation, if you're going to control a radio as a crossband repeater or do echo link, something like that, that's pretty handy. It's always great to have one with you as a spare backup loaner, backpacking, things like that, kind of ultra portable field unit. However, there are a number of issues, right? Everybody should be aware. The antenna systems are kind of universally bad. And what I find probably the most common upgrade, obviously people put different antennas on them. Limited battery life, of course, with modern handhelds have pretty good sized battery options. Either with even just the internal lithium, the standard lithium battery has a reasonable life. And of course, almost all of them have extended battery options, either from the OEM or from the aftermarket. They do have limited power, so you're generally limited to 5 watts. On VHF, the FCC imposes a limit of 7 watts, so you're kind of done. That's the best you can do. They often have poor. This is not universal, but I know a couple of my radios. The speaker is maybe generously the size of a quarter, so you're not gonna. It's not a hi-fi device by any stretch. And some of them have. Well, occasionally you can hear somebody that sounds like they're talking through a cardboard tube, right? So it's you can. Not always. Again, some of the modern ones are really good, but some of them you can still tell that that is definitely a handheld when you hear the audio. It's the one nice thing about it, and I did this with my FT23, my very first radio. It's like, oh well, I want a little better antenna, and so I put an antenna outside on the car, and then the battery life is not fantastic. Certainly using 5 watts, right? You want to extend the battery life, so get a little cigarette lighter adapter, and then it's like, well, it'd be nice to have a little more power. It's like, well, now I've got a little bit of a cabling mess, right? So with the antenna coming in and the power adapter going out, and so then I get a headset, so that plugs in on the other side, and then of course 5 watts isn't enough, right? So you get a little amplifier that also plugs into power, and now I've got now I've got that thing hanging off of it, and pretty soon it's this weird thing like with a spider web of cables coming out of it, right? So not terribly, it's although you can do that, that's probably not the best plan. It's like you're certainly better off, especially now. We have so many great mobile options that that's not really the best way to go. And of course, the small display size. It used to be pretty common that I was like the youngest ham in the room. That's not as common anymore. But the displays, I swear, are shrinking, and at least the lettering on the displays. So there's often little tiny symbols in there that I can't see. I have to admit my favorite radio is my ID51 because I can read it without my glasses. So when you're picking a radio, there's some things to consider, and they're kind of, well, they're oftentimes conflicting issues, right? If you want to be able to use the radio effectively all the time, it's nice to be able to get one that doesn't have a billion features on it, where you pretty much have to have the manual and the supplemental manual, right? That has the, there's the 80-page manual that it comes with, and then the CD that has the 300-page manual on it, right? Where you have to actually also have a device that you can carry with you to actually read the manuals in the field, right? That's not the best plan. So there's this kind of emergency radio that you have that's probably the great backpacker radio, where you don't necessarily need all the features, but it'd be nice to have be able to do just the basic things. So, and it's important, I think, that we do some. We have this ACES class that's a emergency communications class, and one of the things that we do in that class is we make people actually program their radios, and it's a great. The fun thing about doing that in the class is that it's a great equalizer. You find people that that have been hams for 30 years and they know all this stuff, but they still are terrible at programming their radios. And the new hams have often spent some time practicing, and it's kind of fun to watch the new hams embarrass the old hams. So just getting the basics, getting a frequency in, getting your shift set, be able to do tone encode, tone decode, and program that stuff into a memory channel. That's stuff you need to be able to do on the fly. I mean, no matter how well you've programmed your radio, there's definitely going to be an instance where you need to put in some random thing, and being able to do that is important. So that's an important consideration when you look at a radio. Can you actually do that? Spend some time doing that. And then, can you read the display? There's often little things in the display that you need to read. My favorite one is, well, I should say least favorite one, maybe. Yaesu radios with the wires feature. Everybody knows the sound of that beep, right? When somebody accidentally turns on the wires feature. There is an indicator in the display. It's not very big generally, and people don't watch it because they don't realize they have it turned on. Because of course there's no indication to the user that they've done that, other than the little indication in the display that you can barely see. So, can you operate the buttons? Can you read that display? Good battery life, of course, is important, because it's ridiculous to have a radio die on you in the middle of a event. And then, so we'll talk about this a little later, but it turns out there's a number of radios that have, well, there's a number of features that you may or may not want on at all the time. The second receiver, it turns out, pulls a fair amount of power. Scan functions, priority functions, weather alert functions, they all have their annoyances. The wires thing, of course, has that beep that it puts out all the time. So you should be able to turn those things on and off. And we'll often hear people on a net, for example, they have the beep and you let them know, hey, you must have a Yaesu and your wires thing is turned on. And they're like, oh, how do I turn that off? Yeah, you should. If you own a Yaesu radio, you should know how to turn that off. Just saying. So there's actually, I should mention, Kenny Richards from WWARA has a talk about narrowband and kind of migrating the ham bands to narrowband. But it's a little inevitable that it was mandated by the FCC to all commercial radios had to migrate to narrowband FM by January 1st, 2013. So all the public safety, the land mobile, all those guys have all migrated. The nice thing is, it actually gives them more spectrum. Well, gives them more places to put repeaters, for example, more users, more channels, because everybody's using a little bit less spectrum. And that's something that in amateur radio, we don't do that. But for example, in the 2 meter band, everybody wants a nice 2 meter repeater. And there simply hasn't been an open 2 meter repeater slot in decades. The band is full. So rather than migrating to narrow band where we could have additional channels, we simply complain that we don't have enough spectrum. But the FCC is not going to buy that argument since they have a solution and we haven't implemented it. So when you're looking at a radio, you might consider, making sure that your radio can actually do narrow band. And interestingly enough, all the Chinese radios, right down to the Baofangs, can do this, right? So it's some of the ham radios that don't do this well. So some of the older ham radios. This has been done. I think the last really nice radio, kind of unfortunately nice radio that I saw that couldn't do this well was like a Kenwood D700, which is the APRS mobile radio. Was discontinued about 2008, and it's a really nice radio, and it technically does narrow band, but it's not channel by channel where you really need to be able to do it. So it doesn't do it well. So you need to be able to turn that on and off channel by channel. So portable APRS is another fun feature, right, that you might consider. Kenwood has a couple of handhelds, the D72, the D74. It looks like the D74 might have just been discontinued, which was too bad because that was really it was a kick-ass little radio. It had everything in it. It had a gorgeous little color OLED display, had APRS built into it. It was a tri-bander, 2 meter, 220, and 70 centimeters. It had the internal GPS. It has not just APRS tracker, but you can actually plug a PC into it, a USB port in the side of it. It's really, really kind of an awesome radio. But it looks like they've got supply. There was a factory that burned down here a few months ago in Japan, and I think they can't build it. They don't have parts. So the Yaesu VX8R series, for example, has a bunch of other options as well. It also has APRS built into it. The older models have a GPS that mounts on the speaker mic. The newer ones had it built in. Bluetooth had support. There's no PC interface, so I guess for me it's a tracker. So you can't just access the TNC in it. So you can't use it for WinLink. Actually, the fun thing is the D72 and D74 actually have WinLink support in the application. If you run it, you can actually see in WinLink Express those radios are specifically supported. So there's some digital modes available, right? The Project P25 is the commercial solution. A lot of people have been using early on, not so much anymore, but we used to see a fair number of P25 radios or P25 repeaters coming on the air. They're kind of going off the air, and DMR repeaters are now coming on the air. But people used to get those things from, surplus. They have really good voice quality. They have oddly little data support, even though they're digital radios. And they don't have the ability to route voice like DMR does, where you can pick all the different talk groups and talk to whoever. D-Star was kind of the first ham radio digital mode. It was specifically made for ham radio. And there's a full line of D-Star HTs from ICOM, and of course that D74, or the Kenwood D74 also supports it. They're also compatible with FM. They have a data jack, so you can actually do data with them, and you can route calls over the internet. So a little like Echolink. Now the one that's become super popular is DMR, right? You can get lots of DMR radios from a variety of manufacturers. Each of the repeaters has 2 time slots, so you get basically 2 channels on any one repeater. And of course, the talk groups allow you to link repeaters kind of all over the Pacific Northwest. It's pretty impressive. And of course, Yaesu System Fusion, if you've got the ability to, if you have a System Fusion radio, they also have their own digital mode that allows you the combination of voice and data or really high quality voice. So, as I mentioned, the first modification for almost any amateur, for any handheld, is replacing the terrible rubber duck on the tires, on the radio. For some reason, the OEMs managed to produce really extraordinarily bad antennas. It reminds me of you buy a new car, and it doesn't really matter. I've almost always bought the premium tire package with my new cars, and they're still terrible tires. You almost always can just you can go anywhere and get better tires, right? And the same thing's true with these antennas. You can see most of them are just a coil of wire. This is what is this thing? This is a Motorola. I forget what the radio is. Anyway, but you can see that there's the X-ray view of the antenna, and it's literally just a coil of wire. And if you were to stretch it all out, it should be it's probably a quarter wave, so it's probably 19 inches of wire wound into a coil. So they advertise them as a quarter wave antenna, except that by doing that, you end up with a bunch of other there's a bunch of other effects, and one of them is it's not as efficient. It's lossy, and some of the rubber ducks can have as much as minus 20 dB relative to a dipole. That's DBD. That's 100-fold decrease in power. So your 5 watts going into that antenna is 50 milliwatts effective radiated power coming out, right? That's ridiculous. So most of them fall in that minus 8 to minus 10 dBd. So that's nearly a 10-fold loss. That's something that's easily fixable by a little longer whip that's straighter. You can add a counterpoise. That's another simple improvement. Some radios benefit more from this than others. I've heard lots of people say it was fantastic, and other people say, yeah, it didn't really do that much. But they're super easy to make. You can try it out. You literally just crimp a ring lug get a ring that'll slide over the top of your antenna connector, and a piece of 19.5-inch wire. Some people use like a duplex wire, a speaker wire, and they'll have one at 6.5 and one at 19.5. And it basically makes, as it hangs from your radio, which is a little annoying, but as it hangs from your radio, it makes a vertical dipole, and which is actually which can be a significant improvement. The problem is, and you can actually point that thing a little bit for some amount of directionality. The problem with most radios is that, or most of these antenna systems, is that there's a virtually, well, I shouldn't say non-existent ground plane, but it doesn't have a real ground plane, right? The ground plane is effectively the operator, the big bag of salt water hanging on to the radio. That's the ground plane. So it's not super efficient. And having a real ground plane actually makes a huge difference. And literally, and especially if you're in a vehicle where you've got it inside the metal can, right? So just getting anything outside there, I often buy these little $15 mag mount things and throw them up on the roof. They've got they're just a 19-inch whip with a little Hershey's Kiss size magnet at the bottom of them. And, 5 watts into a real antenna is actually useful, but this really does make a big difference. I do have to mention something about gain. Because I don't know if this is a surprise to anyone, but manufacturers lie. So there's an issue when you go on their websites. What they'll do is they'll tell you the calculated gain numbers, and generally these gain numbers are expressed in dBi or dBd. So dBi is gain versus an isotropic resonator, which is an infinitely small point in space. So it's a completely calculated value. It's a physics thing. And so if anybody's expressing anything in dBi, that means they didn't measure it, because it's impossible to measure that because it doesn't actually exist. If they express it in dBd, then it's possible they measured it, but probably not likely. And so what they often will do is that little antenna that you see on the Yaesu there, that Comet SMA 501, that little tiny, it's like a 2-inch high nub. They claim that thing's a quarter wave antenna, which would be 19 inches long, which it clearly is not. And a quarter wave antenna is 0 dBi. Just again, that's the calculated value of a quarter wave antenna, full length with a proper ground plane. That isn't either of those things. And so that is not a 0 dBi antenna, right? but I guarantee you go on their website and that's what it says. So not that they're, well, whatever, they're lying to you. I shouldn't pretend they're not. So you know, don't believe all that marketing stuff. It's not, having a real antenna is like a straight wire of a proper length with a real ground plane. There's no replacing that. And so, and these are super, it's a super easy way to get more power out of better performance out of your antenna. Out of your radio, just replace that antenna.
The running joke is a dummy load is just a, rubber duck is just a dummy load. Just the running joke. Well,
this thing in particular, it's super flexible too. It's really, it's a really nice dummy load, I have to say. You can't break. I mean, it's almost unbreakable. It's just this cool little rubbery thing. And you know, if you're at a Hamfest or something, it's a fantastic option. But not if you actually want to talk to somebody outside the building. So generally, you know, bigger is better, right? The 19-inch whips are a full quarter wave on 2 meters. So if you get the, you know, there's those ones that are made out of kind of piano wire and a rubber coating that are all whippy. I like those because they're hard to. They don't put a lot of strain on the connector. They're a little whippy. In fact, if they start whipping around, it's a little funny because you can hear this as somebody talks. You hear this, whoosh, 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 you know, as the thing goes out of phase or changes its angle a little bit. You can actually hear it sometimes in their voice. So the other ones, these telescoping half-wave antennas. It's hard to put these on a handheld. You know, way back when BNC connectors were the norm and not SMA connectors that have some actual mechanical, rigidity to them and support in, you know, cases where more often metal than plastic. You could actually put one of these on a handheld, but now it's a little more difficult. You can do it. You just have to be super careful. That SMA connector is not really designed for lots of cycles and certainly not for a huge load like this. They do have, so a half-wave ground plane or a half-wave antenna with no ground plane has about the same performance as a quarter wave with a ground plane. So having that 32-inch antenna out there, or whatever 36-inch antenna has some benefit. And you'll often find half-wave antennas are used for marine because, of course, on a boat you don't have a lot of big plastic boat doesn't have a good ground plane. So. And of course, anything outside the vehicle, just getting an antenna on top of your vehicle, these little $15 mag mount things, well, I think MFJ sells them for $25, but you can buy them, little dual band guys. They really do make a huge difference. Just getting something outside the vehicle, like a full quarter wave with a nice ground plane in your car, it's a vast improvement. And of course, there's portable antennas, right? Twinly J-poles, the Sky N9TAX makes fantastic antennas. I don't know if I have him in the references page, but he's on eBay. You can do a search on his call sign. He makes these Twinly J-poles. You can build them. I wouldn't recommend it. He does a better job. And if you don't have all the right stuff, you can't possibly do a better job than he does. And or if you do, you should be selling them, by the way. They're relatively inexpensive, about 20 some bucks, and he'll make it with any length of coax you want on it, any kind of connector you want on it, all that stuff. So they're really great antennas. And you can just coil them up, and they can be easily stuffed in a bag, and you can just hang them when you go to use them and hook them to your handheld. So if you're at a location where you need to use a handheld, again, if you want it's a good hiking antenna, it's a really great portable antenna. Mag mount antennas, I tend to use those a lot because you can put them pretty much anywhere. It's not too hard to find some kind of metal surface, the top of a refrigerator, a cookie sheet, a garbage can lid, dumpster, whatever. You can almost always find some chunk of metal to stick these on. Of course, the magnet won't stick to anything but steel, but the electrons don't care what kind of metal it is underneath it, right? So, if you've got some chunk of aluminum, you have to keep it from tipping over potentially, but it'll work fine. Tram and some others make a base adapter. So Larson has this thing they call a BSA kit, and it's the base station adapter kit. Trams is like, everything's numbered, so it's like 1465 or something. That's super helpful. But it's an NMO base with a bracket that you can strap to a mast, and it has 4 little ground plane wires that go in there into the base. And you can then just take, if you have an NMO base antenna on your car, you can take that off and you can put it on this thing, and now you have a base antenna. So you can either migrate your existing mobile antenna or just buy any NMO whip and put it on there, and it works fantastic. It just turns it into a base antenna. There's also these telescoping 2-meter and dual band whips that are super compact and really effective if you can add some kind of ground plane. The nice thing is they're generally loaded quarter waves when they're retracted, so they still perform well retracted, and then when you extend them all the way out, they're actually full half-wave whips. It looks like there's chat stuff, and I'm sorry I can't see the chat. Is this for me? Are there questions for me, or?
People are pretty much giving information and connections to the antennas you're talking about.
Excellent.
I'll come back to them. There was one question about if you'd share the deck, but
yes,
we can come back to that at the end.
Okay, excellent.
In a Zoom meeting.
All right, so there's some directional antennas too that are worth considering. It turns out there's a really good design for a tape measure Yagi that was designed for direction finding, and you can do a search on Google for tape measure Yagi. It's probably easier than typing this in anyway. And it was designed to have a specific shape so that you can use it with your handheld, and it's a cardioid shape, and it has a really big null in the back. So you basically turn around until the signal goes away, and then you know that the signal's behind you because it's in that null. But the joke is the front of that thing actually has good gain, and it's nice and broad, so it's not too pointy. You don't have to be too crazy with it because it was designed to be deaf in the back. So the front of it's actually kind of nice, and it's hard to beat a tape measure because you can just roll that thing up, and so it's a piece of PVC pipe with some tape measure. It kind of sucks in the wind, admittedly, because it wants to flop all around like one of those signs at the car dealerships, but the little blow up guys. But in general, it's a super portable antenna it's pretty cheap to make if you've got an old tape measure. I will tell you Stanley tape measures are the best, but if you've got an old dead tape measure, it's a fantastic way to make an antenna. In fact, you can get about 3 antennas out of a 25-foot tape measure. So Arrow antennas have their super portable antennas. It's just an aluminum boom with arrow shafts that they screw into this thing in a little connector. They've got a dual bander version, and it's a pretty handy little again, portable antenna, but gives you actual gain. So they've got little clamps and stuff. You can put them on a mast, and so it's a fantastic solution for that. There's a German company. It looks like it's WA7LAW. It's pronounced Vimo, right? Because it's a German W. But Vimo has, they're a dealer, but they make a lot of their own stuff or have it fabricated for them. So they have this thing they call a window quad, well, Fenster quad. It's a window quad, and it's kind of clever. It's riveted, so you can see in the picture here, there's a big square and a little square, so it's dual band. The big square is for 2 meters, the little square is for 70 centimeters. The thing wasn't terribly expensive. I ordered one, and actually the shipping was pretty reasonable too. I mean, you have to order it from Germany, but and their website is there's a poor English translation of their website that's still functional, but they're pretty cool. They come with little suction cups. You can stick them in a window, and you just hang this thing in the window. It has a B and C connector to hook your radio to, and it actually has a little bit of gain. And so for like an apartment or something like that, a hotel window, you can hang this thing up, and it's a pretty good solution actually to get a signal out of a hotel or building or apartment, whatever. So batteries, a lot of this is not so relevant. Now everything's pretty much all gone to lithium ion. Unless you have an older radio, you really don't run into the nickel cadmiums or nickel metal hydride batteries anymore. But it's just mention here of the kind of show you the relative capacity of a AA size cell in these different technologies, and the fact that you get I mean, there still is a virtue. NiCads and nickel metal hydride batteries hung out there for a long time in commercial service because they have a crazy number of recharge cycles that lithiums don't have. The newer lithiums have some more protections, and they're smarter chargers and all that stuff to extend that recharge cycle. So you can get, if you've got a properly maintained battery. Motorola has their Impress technology. That's the super smart technology where there's a chip inside each battery. And it talks to the charger, and it tells it all the characteristics of the battery. So they do this super smart charging, and they can extend the charge cycles of those batteries. But you can imagine, as expensive as the nickel metal hydride Motorola batteries were, as soon as you put a chip and make them lithium inside there, they're super cost effective, right? Anyway, so there's an interesting thing about lithium ion batteries that not everybody realizes, I think. So NiCad batteries have a relatively low internal impedance. So what that means is that they self-discharge pretty quickly. If you charge up a NiCad battery and sit it on the shelf, within like 2 weeks, it's uselessly dead, right? You have no juice left in it, just sitting on the shelf. That's not true with, well, alkalins have the best shelf life. So they are a really good source. If you have a AA pack for your radio, they're a really good source of emergency power, because you can go to any 7-Eleven or Mini Mart and buy yourself a brand new power supply for your radio, just some AA batteries. But lithium ions are, just charging up a lithium ion battery, you can see here that you get 50% of your charge after nearly 2 years. So just sitting on the shelf. The concern, of course, is some radios have a little bit of self-discharge. So when we store batteries, I always store the batteries and the radios separately, so they don't. There's just a tiny bit of draw from the radio, and that is the one disadvantage I have to say of my ID51. Otherwise, I love that radio, but it does self-discharge. It has a load that's present. It still takes a while, but where the radio should last on that radio, the battery should last on that radio almost indefinitely. It doesn't. It only has maybe a month or two before I have to charge it up again. So of course, you could never really have enough power anyway, right? High transmit power is going to drain your battery quickly, and of course, everyone wants to use high power on a handheld because they don't have a lot of power to begin with, right? And if you had a busy 8-hour shift of whatever kind of event thing you were doing, you're talking a lot, you could pretty easily drain 2 battery packs, more than 1 battery pack. The newer lithium ion batteries, they have a lot of capacity, 1200 to 3500 milliamp hours. You can get these extended batteries for a lot of the radios. That can be significant. And that's again, with the nice thing about the lithiums is if you had more than one of them, you can just keep it charged and separate from the radio, and it's almost as good as having a AA pack as far as that goes. So the AA's are nice because, of course, you can drop AA's in. The problem with them is they often you don't get the same voltage, so they often operate the radio at a lower output. So you don't get full output when you're using the AA's. And of course, if you have some mechanism to recharge your batteries regularly and store in a cool, dry place, that's helpful. Interestingly, so lithiums don't like to be stored either dead flat, no battery likes that, or they don't like being stored at 100% either. So having it just charge it up and set it on the shelf and then they actually don't mind being discharged or sitting at like 80% is where they kind of want to be on the shelf. So you don't have to be too crazy about keeping them topped off. They actually don't like it. So of course, more power. You've got sealed lead acid batteries. The gel batteries are pretty easy to find from UPSs and medical equipment. So a lot of companies have regular maintenance cycles where they pull those batteries out of service after. Well, it depends on how critical the components are. A lot of times they're as frequently as every 2 years, and a lead acid battery still has a lot of good life in it after 2 years. So those are still useful batteries, especially if you don't have to pay for them. That's the key. The newer lithium iron phosphate batteries, the LiFePO batteries, are also pretty effective. They are They often look expensive. Bieno is a super common manufacturer. They have the nice Anderson power pole connectors on the top for amateur radio use. Or Bioenno, Bioenno, I believe is the spelling. Anyway, you can buy these batteries. They are super lightweight and relatively compact. They have a smaller volume and a smaller weight for the same capacity. They do tend to be more expensive. The one, I guess to be fair, you can't actually compare lead acid capacity with lithium battery capacity, because the battery voltage of a lead acid battery, you can only draw it down about 50% before you get below the useful voltage. So you're only ever going to get, you see, even if you had I have an example in my notes, which I can't see. I was trying to remember, to see if I can remember it. So if you had an 80 amp hour battery, lead acid battery, you're only going to be able to use about 40 amp hours of it before the voltage drops below a useful level. If you had a corresponding lithium battery, you can get about 80% of the battery's capacity out before the voltage drops below that level. It has a different discharge curve. And they also don't mind that either. It doesn't hurt them. So in that case, a 50 amp hour battery is going to get you 40 amp hours out. So what you really need to compare is a 50 amp hour lithium to an 80 amp hour lead acid battery. And then suddenly it becomes a little more cost effective, right? That's the actual comparison. It's not really fair to compare the listed rating on the batteries. So, and of course, a small case or a little backpack with a battery and some connectors and a charging system, you could have power forever. And of course, if you have a pair of these things, you can charge one while the other one's being used. I mentioned power poles. The nice thing about them is they're a super common connector. There's all kinds of accessories. I have like every conceivable adapter that goes to an Anderson power pole, and it's pretty fantastic to be able to grab it, put something in a cigarette lighter and have power out, to be able to take a power source and have a cigarette lighter receptacle on it, right, that you can draw power from. It's a really great solution. And as I mentioned, those Bioenno batteries already come with power poles on them. Here I've made I've taken one of an old UPS battery and put a power pole on it, and then that lets me just hook up alligator clips. I can charge it with a little float charger. There's all kinds of things you can do with these adapters and power. It's a super versatile power solution. So the other thing you need to know is, once you have a battery for, well, I think everybody recognizes when you have your cell phone for about 5 years, at least for me, one of the reasons I almost always end up getting a new cell phone is that, the battery that's sealed inside that thing that's not replaceable is now become worthlessly small, right? I have to manage my power consumption throughout the day to make it last a day. Like, that's the signal to get a new cell phone, right? And you have the same problem with handheld radio batteries. And there's this, West Mountain Radios has this thing they call the CBA, the Computerized Battery Analyzer. And it has a UPS connection on it. I mean, sorry, USB. When I say UPS, a USB connection on it, and power poles. And basically, what it does is it's a fancy load, but it has this USB connection that lets you then monitor the voltage of the battery. So you can load up a battery and watch its discharge curve, and you can actually measure how much capacity is in the battery. These are kind of a fun device to just kind of characterize the capability of your batteries. There's also this fancy KDEX charger that will do the same thing, and you can exercise the batteries, you can discharge them and recharge them. It'll show you how much capacity is. You can buy custom cups for every kind of battery. That thing is crazy expensive. It's a couple $1,000s, but these computerized battery analyzer things are about $150, something like that. And they're an interesting kind of, we bought, so for our Microhams Club, the Microsoft Amateur Radio Club, we bought one of those, and just as a club resource. But you can take it and test all your batteries out. The easy solution is, the cheap solution, I should say, is just put the radio on receive, squelch open knot, whatever, and then just record the runtime. A lot of the radios actually have voltmeters built into them, so you can actually use the radio itself to tell you what its voltage is. So you come back once an hour. So I've done some tests, and I come back once an hour, I set a little alarm, come back till the thing's dead, and I record the voltage. And then as a geek, I have to put all the numbers in Excel and make myself a little curve. And anyway, so I can see how long the battery lasts. So to maximize that battery life, you want to use the minimum transmit power necessary. Of course, that's, in guidelines with, FCC guidelines, right? It's complementary there. Want minimum transmit power. Most cases, you're trying to talk a long way with a handheld, so you don't really have any choice but to use higher power. Keep the radio squelched. So get your squelch setting appropriate or use tone squelch. We use the minimum required volume setting. Again, a headset will help you there because you don't have to have the volume cranked up all the way to get any useful volume out of it. Disable backlighting when not in use. There's a lot of radios have a power saving feature where they'll go to sleep a little bit. They won't leave the receiver hot all the time. It turns out scanning and second receivers in radios consume a fair amount of power. It can nearly double the power consumption of the radio on standby. So turn off scanning. If you don't need a second VFO, if you're listening to one thing, if you're listening to a channel, just turn off that second receiver if you're not using it anyway. So that's a good thing to know how to do on your radios, convert it to a single receiver. It'll extend your battery life significantly. Of course, generating power. There's all these little generators. The Honda, of course, is the kind of gold standard of portable generators. They're 30 pounds. Now there's more and more of these solar generators, which I think is a super goofy name. Because anyway, it's basically just a box with a battery and an inverter and some power ports, right? And a built-in charger. The Goal Zero ones are super fancy. They have this nice little display on them that tell you how much battery capacity they have and at your current consumption, how long it'll last. And you can go on Amazon. We recently bought some newer generation solar generators with lithium batteries in them. This particular one is the one I have at DEM, and it's about 30 pounds. It's got a lead acid battery in it. But the newer ones are actually higher capacity and lighter weight, of course. And they so you can see there's AC outlets on these things, just like a generator has. There's some USB ports so you can charge your cell phones. There's a cigarette lighter output. It also has power poles on the side of it that are designed to hook up external batteries, but you can also draw power from them, so you can actually run a higher powered radio. Comes a little wall wart to charge it, or you can hook up a solar panel to it and plug it into the input jack on this thing, and you can have power almost indefinitely as long as you're pulling it at a reasonable rate. Radios are not a huge load, so I've got a nice little folding solar panel that's about the size of a book. You flop it out, it's a 65 watt panel. That's going to run a handheld forever. Or even a modest radio, a mobile radio, 65 watt. In the daytime, you're not going to get all that. This is Washington, you're not getting that, right? But you'll get enough power to keep that thing topped off. So, and of course, the nice thing is you don't know refueling. They're completely silent. They don't have any stinky exhaust. It's a pretty nice solution. Audio, and of course, getting speaker mics are nice because you can put them up, up on your lapel, and you've got it much closer to your ear, so that you don't have to crank it all up. And the audio is going to be a little bit better than a radio on your hip, where the audio from the quarter-size speaker is firing straight away from you. So getting it up by your ear is nice, just having a speaker mic. And then the even better solution is some kind of a headset, and they're much better in a high noise environment, and they keep the radio. You can tuck the radio somewhere else, basically. Most of the public safety folks, fire and law enforcement guys, they know the Statue of Liberty pose. They have their speaker mic and they have their handhelds they can hold up away from them, so the radio is as high and in the clear as possible. And that's it actually does improve the performance of the radio, being able to do that. So getting it up and away from you. There's a bunch of really compact units from the OEMs. They usually focus on really, really small things. There's some aftermarket guys like Prime here. MFJ sells these things. My two favorite ones are Kenwood makes this kind of sport style headset that is a wire that goes over your ears and then has a single earpiece and then a boom mic that comes out and it goes around the back of your head. So you can still wear a hat if you want, because it goes around the back of your neck like a jogging headset. That's really nice. The other one is Heil actually makes one of the few products they have that are really cost effective, a really good deal. They make a really nice quality headset. It's kind of bulky. It's definitely not compact. Well, it's not, it's not miniature in any way, right? It's pretty obvious you're wearing. You're not going to fool anybody. You're wearing a big old headset, but they have really good audio quality, and they're like under $40. It's a pretty good price. They have them for virtually every kind of radio. Programming it. So the best way to get a good use out of it, you don't want to have to program your radio everywhere you go, right? So you definitely want to be able to get everything programmed into it in advance to minimize your fiddling. So there's the best repeater list available for Western Washington is available directly from WWARA. They have it on their website. It's unfortunately, it's not super obvious. In fact, I saved it here. In fact, I can't even remember what it is. I'll have to go look, but it's, there's a thing about coordinate. I think it's under coordination. It's a limitation of the new website, but we were trying to make it a little more obvious, but there's a data file that you can get. So it's available in both a PDF version, and then it's available in multiple electronic versions as well. So there's a CSV file that happens to be in chirp format, and then there's an actual chirp formatted file. So literally, if you're using chirp to program your radio, you can import the entire Western Washington repeater directory directly into chirp and then stuff it in a radio. It'd be a really bad idea because you'd never find anything, but you could do it. It's technically possible, right? So you want to use alpha tags probably when possible, so you can find things instead of remembering the numbers. Again, when you're using software to do this, it's pretty easy. You can just type in a name that's helpful to you. There's a number of other things you might consider putting in there: FRS and GMRS frequencies, the weather channels. There's some weird TV feeds that are kind of fun to listen to, the backhaul feeds and stuff. Aircraft, maybe marine. There's a bunch of itinerant stuff, red dot, blue dot, some of these other things. So in Snohomish County, we're on 800 megahertz, so you can't monitor that. But in other places, I have like the ferry frequency in, so I'm sitting at the ferry dock. I can listen to the ferry guys, and they'll talk about when the boat's coming and how many cars they can stuff on it and all that stuff. So RT Systems makes some of the best programming software out there. You end up having to buy a package for each radio model generally, which if you have a bunch of different radios can get kind of expensive. So as if the radios weren't expensive enough, now you have to buy a piece of software for each one. So I tend to use Chirp. It's a really good piece of software, and it can program most radios. And of course, then the OEMs often provide software for them as well. So when you're buying like especially when you have like a DMR radio or something like that that's very complicated, you pretty much have to go back to the OEM to get their software because you need to be able to access all the different features. And of course, the one thing I have to mention here is if you're going to transmit out, if your radio has been modified, or if you're using a Part 90 radio, like the Chinese radios that can transmit outside the ham bands, you want to make sure that you're either disabling the transmittability on certain frequencies. So the weather channel is a good example, or the example where I gave with the ferry service. You don't ever want to transmit on those channels because that will really upset them. If you have a way to do transmit disable, that's a nice feature. The one thing I do just generically, rather than worry about whether my radio has that, is I just use an odd split. I have a really big split to make sure if I transmit, it transmits back into the ham band somewhere. So I really can't transmit on that frequency. It is possible you know, you can make the case of in an emergency. Well, what if I need to talk to them in an emergency? Well, then I can just turn off that split, right? I just put it back in simplex mode, and now I'm on that channel. But I don't end up transmitting on the weather channel or something like that, right, where everybody's listening. So of course, more power. You know, there's putting these, instead of using a handheld, maybe looking at a mobile radio of some kind, or maybe a compact mobile radio. So this is a super tiny little Anytone with a battery pack and in a tiny little case. And this is a pretty compact unit. It's obviously bigger than a handheld, but it'll put out 25 watts, and I have a real antenna connector on it and stuff. It'll actually do a pretty nice job. You generally get better audio. You've got a larger speaker. You've got a real microphone. It's oftentimes easier to use because you've got nice big buttons. You have a little more real estate there. And of course, just adding an amplifier to a handheld radio, the problem with handhelds is they really weren't designed for a long duty cycle. In fact, some of them, you'll note if you transmit at 5 watts for very long, they can get pretty warm, right? They're really not designed for that kind of duty cycle. I used to have, well, I still have it. It's an Alinco DJ580, a nice dual bander. It had a metal belt clip that it used actually as a part of its heat sink. So the belt clip screwed into the back of the radio right behind the transistor where the heat sink was. And it made a really good timeout timer, because at 5 watts, you could only hang on to the thing for so long before you had Alinco burned into your palm. So they really don't work that well. And of course, you can get more elaborate. And we talked about this last time, so I won't, but putting some radios in boxes is a pretty nice solution for having portable stuff. And then of course, don't think about if you're going to have like a little ham radio go bag, not just the radio, but think about the other things you might need to go with it, right? Pens, pencils, paper, some message forms, antenna adapters, cables, manuals, all that stuff. What else do you need to take with you? If you can put, manuals downloaded on your phone, that's a really good solution. So you can always refer to it. There's the little nifty guides. Those kinds of things are super helpful. They're really compact, dense source of that information in a pretty readable format. The guy spends some time making sure that they're actually readable. And then I think I just have some references. Yeah, that looks about right. Yeah. Any questions?
That was fantastic.
Yeah, great job, Scott. Great job. Any questions? Just unmute yourself. We'll have chaos here.
Scott, I used that elk antenna, but I was using it mostly for my satellite stuff. And I went through 3 of them. So I went the arrow antenna. So I ended up buying an elk because there is no moving parts.
Right.
On the arrow, there's a duplexer in there for 2 meters and 770, and they go bad if you bang them around a little bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The elk antenna, it's a log periodic, and it's
Yes.
It's mechanically, it's definitely mechanically a more substantial antenna. It's definitely more
and it'll
rugged
fit in
antenna.
your suitcase just like the
Sure.
arrow does.
Right. Yeah, that's a good choice. I should mention that. Yeah, that's a great option.
I took it to Hawaii with me once, and I ended up losing one of the tips, and on the walk back. So
On the arrow antenna?
on the arrow, yeah. So I had to
And
buy some more tips.
I was gonna say, did TSA like you when you went back with the sharpened arrow shaft in there?
Yeah. No, that was with just a screwdriver.
Hey, Scott, there's been several requests. Can we get a copy of your slide deck?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send a link to Anne, I suppose. Is that the best option? Okay.
That would be great. I can send it out.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
And also, we'll figure out where to post both the video of this, and I think I can capture the comments in the chat box too as a file, and we'll figure out a place on the
In fact, as I say,
website to put those. Questions?
Hey, Dave.
Yeah, Jim.
I just want to put a plug in for Scott's class. I took that class several years ago, and we went through the exercise of programming the radios. And there's one scenario where he has you do a split and 2 different codes, and you're standing on your head, and they're spraying you with ice water just to make sure you can do it properly. And it was a good exercise. Yeah, you think you know your radio till you sit down with Scott for about 15 minutes and then you realize you don't know anything. So yeah, it was a good class. And I like to give a plug for that N9TAX antenna. My wife's got one here for Soda Summits, and that thing is just totally awesome.
Tom and I used one of those at Joda for hanging on the tent. Worked like a champ.
And I just posted the presentation link in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? We can give Scott a few minutes before his next presentation. I think you're doing something at 10, Scott?
Yes, for the Highline Amateur Radio Club in Burien, I think. Yeah.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you being here, and just a fantastic presentation. A lot of great information. Tom, you got something?
Thank you, Scott.
Absolutely.
So this was practice for your next presentation. You did a great job, Scott. Thank you very much.
Got all warmed up, got the pipes tuned. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was awesome.
All right. Well, then, if there's nothing else, I'm going to stop the recording. And there we go.